The Road Home by Wood Reede. I will never forget the day I discovered the painting, or rather, the day the painting discovered me. It was a Sunday, early in the afternoon. The city was quiet, unhurried, freed of the weekday masses affixed to mobile phones, vying for tables at restaurants, impatiently waiting for Ubers. I sensed, or perhaps I imagined, a relaxed stillness, a letting go, as if after the frenzied work week, the city, my city, could finally breathe. And as I walked down Fifth Avenue, Central Park to my right, stately brownstones to my left, I listened as the city spoke to me in quiet whispers. I had no intention of visiting the museum that day, but a downpour started suddenly, and it was my good luck to be near the Museum of Modern Art. I've maintained a membership for years, so when the sky turned dark and the first drops began to fall, I sought shelter within its venerable walls. I reasoned I could wait out the storm strolling the galleries, visiting favorite artists, Stella and Thebaud, Pollock and Mellon, Albers and Bill, all the works of whom I regard as old and cherished friends. Looking back, I don't remember what I originally planned to do that day. I may have intended to catch up on work or spend the morning ensconced in a booth at my favorite diner reading the Times. But with the onset of the storm, all plans, whatever they might have been, were forgotten. I turned down 53rd, sprinted to the museum's entrance, pulling my membership card from my wallet, and presented it to the gray-haired, slightly plump woman seated behind the members' reception desk. She smiled and gave me a small sticker imprinted with the museum's name and a folded brochure listing current exhibits. "Place this where the guards can easily see it," she advised, handing me the sticker. "We have several new exhibitions starting on the second floor. The elevator and escalator are behind me and to the left. Our cafes are located on the second and fifth floors, and you'll find our gift shop downstairs. Enjoy your visit." I thanked her and started for the escalator, pausing briefly to admire a Gilhooly sculpture of what appeared to be a small mountain of fat ceramic frogs, a promising start to my unexpected visit. At the top of the escalator, I turned left and approached the first gallery. The exhibition was titled Renegades, Figurative Landscapes in Modern Art. Intrigued, and seeing as how the rain continued, now punctuated by flashes of lightning and the rumble of thunder, this seemed as good a place as any to start my exploration, so I entered. There is something about the atmosphere of a museum gallery. Off-white walls, high ceilings, polished floors, optimal light. Often there is a hushed reverence among the visitors, quiet murmurings, thoughtful conjectures, low-toned discussion. Time seems to slow. I can only liken the experience to that of entering a place of worship. I joined the flow of patrons and followed suit, taking my time to examine each piece, appreciate the level of execution, and duly note the artist and title. I was halfway around the gallery when I came upon the painting. It was, as promised, a landscape. But it wasn't just any landscape. There was something about it, something that called to me. Maybe it was the fragment of road, or the curve of verdant hills, or the massive clusters of clouds suspended in a painfully blue sky. I can still see those billowing, velvety clouds. They commanded the landscape, commanded the viewer, spoke of solace, and something I can only describe as quiet contentment. I know I'm not making much sense. It makes no sense to me even now. It was just a painting after all. But it sparked in me a kind of nostalgia, a nostalgia for childhood and the abandon of summer days and the luxury of being lost in magical places only a child's imagination can go. I wanted to lay on the velvet grass and gaze up at those boundless clouds. I wanted to step into that landscape and never leave. I wanted to feel it, breathe it, become part of it, to possess it as much as it now seemingly possessed me. Is it possible to feel so strongly for a thing an object that it comes alive, is no longer just paint and canvas, no longer two-dimensional? Is it possible that the depth and strength of desire can transform an inanimate object into a living, breathing entity? Standing before the landscape, I was overwhelmed with the conviction that if I could gaze up at those clouds and take the road to its end, I might discover something I'd long forsaken. We all seek peace in one way or another. Some find it in religion, nature, loved ones. Some never find it. I must confess I was one of those people, never knowing peace, never truly able to breathe. And now here I was on this rain-soaked Sunday, intoxicated, uplifted, transformed. A comforting warmth traveled through my body, and I had the curious sensation of floating ever so gently above the floor. It was as if I was filled with a golden light, and at any moment it would burst forth from my fingertips and my eyes and the ends of each hair on my head. I wanted this euphoria to last forever, but if life has taught me anything, it is that nothing lasts forever. Eventually, and to my great disappointment, I began to descend, and in turn, the warmth and the golden light began to dim until I felt nothing at all. I did not move from the painting until I was approached by a museum guard and politely asked to leave. The museum was closing. I had spent 4 hours absorbed in the landscape, and I'm certain I would have remained 4 hours more. You must understand, I'm not a man given to flights of fancy. I'm practical, precise, particular. I'm well versed in all subjects of logic, probability, mathematics. I'm rarely late. I read nonfiction, never fantasy. I don't take drugs, and I didn't in college, not much anyway, and yet my experience defied all explanation and indeed all logic. I don't remember taking the escalator to the main floor or stepping outside or even walking home, if I did walk home. I might have taken the subway or an Uber or one of the few remaining yellow cabs in the city. I have no memory of the journey. The next thing I knew, I was unlocking the door to my brownstone in Chelsea. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and went straight to bed, shedding my clothes and shoes as I made my way up the stairs. That night, I dreamt of rolling green hills and an endless cloud-filled sky. I was in the painting, and yet I was standing outside the painting, peering in. I watched myself walk down the road. I heard the crunch of rocks and soil beneath my shoes, felt the sun on my face, listened as a soft breeze rustled the leaves in the trees, bringing with it a subtle hint of brine. Perhaps the sea was just over the next hill. I kept walking, and as I walked, I watched myself walk. Such an odd sensation, and yet strangely normal. Such is the way with dreams. In this dreamland, I had no worries, no cares, felt no pain, no heartache, no loss. Nothing mattered but the road and the hills and the endless cloud-strewn sky. I didn't care where the road led. I was content to follow it for as long as my legs and my feet allowed. I would follow it until my shoes grew holes and my socks fell apart. I would follow it until I could no longer put one foot in front of the other, until I could no longer move. Soon, I was joined by a white dog. I've always been fond of dogs, though I've never owned one. The dog fell into step, and we walked side by side. The fact that this dog was now my companion seemed the most natural thing in the world. We had walked a considerable distance when, from the corner of my eye, I caught a flash of movement. I stopped, and for the first time considered the possibility that I was not alone. I watched myself turn a slow circle, look up at the clouds, gaze down the road. I shaded my eyes and looked deep into the painting. Clouds continued to drift overhead. Trees kept beat with the breeze. The road wandered on. The dog panted. Again I saw movement, and now a young woman stood before me. She was slight in build and pale, almost translucent. She wore a blue dress, and her dark hair fell to her shoulders. She stared at me, stared into me, her eyes changing color, blue, green, purple, turquoise, jade, and on and on. "Hello," she said. "Hello," I replied. "What are you doing here?" "I don't know," I said. "I think I'm in a dream, my dream." "It's possible," she said, "but then again, this might be my dream." "Yes," I said, and I watched her eyes change from azure to indigo to turquoise. She sighed and said, "Well, where are you going?" "I don't know," I replied. "I'm just following the road." She looked down the road, then back to me and said, "You should always know where you're going." "Yes," I answered, "but I haven't known where to go or how to get there for a very long time." "There was a time when you did." I was about to question her curious remark when far off a noise sounded. It was muted at first and then grew more and more insistent. The young woman began to fade until only a whisper of her eyes remained. The dog left my side, the landscape grew dim, and my body lifted from the road. My dream was coming to an end. I fought to stay, but, as with most dreams, it was useless. I was pulled from the depths of sleep, and with each minute, daylight became brighter and brighter until I was fully awake, the sound of my alarm blaring. Still wrapped in the luxury of my dream, I lay in bed and listened to the rumble of trucks and cars and fragments of conversation as they sifted through my bedroom window. With great effort, I hauled myself up, shuffled to the bathroom, and stepped into the shower. I turned the taps as far as they would go and let the blast of water pummel my neck and head. Finally, I shaved and dressed, collected my wallet and keys, and left for the office, stopping on the way to buy coffee and a bagel. It was autumn in Manhattan, hands down the best time of year. The summer had been remarkably hot and muggy, even by New York standards, but with the onset of fall, the air was mercifully crisp, the sky clear and blue, and the trees were decked in reds and yellows. I took no notice. As I walked down 9th Avenue, I could not stop thinking about the painting and my dream and the young woman with the ever-changing eyes. I longed to revisit the landscape, to step into it, to return to the road and the clouds and the dog. The more I pondered the dream, the more agitated I became. Street noise rose in volume. The sidewalk became unbearably crowded. Faces distorted as they passed me by. The air felt heavy and thick. I crossed 32nd and walked headfirst into a bike messenger. My coffee fell to the sidewalk, exploding on impact. "What the hell, dude?" "Sorry," I mumbled. At that moment, I knew what I had to do. I tossed my bagel to a waiting flock of pigeons and summoned an Uber. I had to see the painting again. By the time I arrived at the museum, my pulse was racing, my head vibrating, and my heart hammering so intensely I was certain it would burst from my chest. I jumped from the Uber before it came to a full stop and ran straight to the member's desk, my membership card ready. I accepted my sticker, jammed it into my pocket, and took the escalator 2 steps at a time, tripping on the last 2. It wasn't until I was standing before the painting that I allowed myself to take a breath. I leaned close, searching the landscape for a sign of the young woman. Nothing. I closed my eyes, attempted to conjure the warmth and energy I had experienced the day before. Nothing. I opened my eyes, peered deep into the landscape. I felt nothing. The landscape was just a landscape, nothing more. Was I losing my mind? Was my obsession with this painting and my dream a bizarre cognitive quirk? I rarely cry, and never in public, but as I stood before the painting, tears filled my eyes, and I was overwhelmed with a wave of something I can only describe as inconsolable despair. Of course the painting was just a painting, nothing but canvas and paint. The gallery was starting to crowd with visitors. The sound of footsteps and murmurings surrounded me. If anyone noticed a well-dressed, middle-aged man weeping, no one said anything. This was New York, after all. I closed my eyes and weighed my options. I could return home, consign myself to bed, and put the last 24 hours behind me, or I could check myself into Bellevue for observation. Deciding on the former, I wiped my face with the palm of my hand and turned to leave. I hadn't taken more than a few steps when I was overcome with the sensation of floating gently above the floor. A wave of warmth traveled through my body, radiating to the tips of my fingers and the ends of my toes and to the end of each hair on my head. I hovered for a moment and then felt something I can only describe as a tug or a pull. It was so subtle I thought I must be imagining it, but the sensation became stronger. To my amazement, the painting was pulling me, drawing me in. I wanted to laugh out loud and may have done just that. I don't recall. And then I was flesh and bone no more, without substance or mass, and as such, I passed through the paint and canvas in a way that I can only describe as flowing into the painting. And in return, I allowed the painting to flow into me. I stood once more on the winding road, surrounded by green hills. As before, I suffered no worries, no pain, no heartache, no loss. With the white dog by my side, I began to walk. I delighted in the endless banks of billowing clouds, listened to the rhythmic crunch of rocks and soil beneath my shoes, felt the sun warm my face. Maybe this time I would walk the road to its end. And now the young woman was standing before me, her eyes brilliant, shifting from azure to indigo to cerulean, then emerald and jade and aquamarine. "Hello again," she said. "Hello. You came back." "Yes." "You must have wanted to return very badly," she said. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I did." We walked in an easy silence, the white dog keeping pace with our steps. Finally, she said, "You don't have to leave. You can stay if you want to." The thought of remaining, never returning to the outside, was an extraordinary proposition. My immediate reaction was to shout, "Yes, yes, I'll stay forever, as long as I can walk with you, stare up at these clouds, travel this road, always feel this content." But how could I? How could I abandon the life I've always known? This place, whatever it was imagined, a childhood fantasy. The dogs, the clouds, the young woman, all fantasy. And so I said, I can't stay. This world, as fantastic as it is, isn't real. It is a dream. Real is how you are feeling in this moment. That is all that matters. A breath of wind moved her dark hair around her head, rippled the grass, ushered the clouds across the sky. The dog looked up, his eyes searching mine. I looked away and said, "I have responsibilities, commitments. They don't matter, not here." "How long can this last?" I asked. "Some things last forever," she said, "if you let them." She waited for me to answer, but I was afraid, and so I said nothing. And just as before, she began to fade. The dog, the road, the clouds, the grass, all began to fade. I was pulled to the light of day and to the world I left behind, a museum employee tapping me on the shoulder, politely asking if I needed help. Once again, the museum was closing. I had been standing before the landscape for hours, my cheeks wet with tears. When I returned the next morning, The exhibit was gone. The painting returned to an anonymous collector. The clouds, the road, the dog, the young woman, all gone. I have never felt such pain, such heartache, such loss. I am now an old man. I have lived all of my life in the city and will most likely spend my final days here. But the city no longer comforts or speaks to me as it did in my younger years, not since that rain-soaked Sunday I happened upon the painting. I have spent a good part of my life in search of the landscape and the young woman and the endless road, but mostly in search of myself. Even now, after all these years, when I close my eyes and surrender myself to sleep, I hold hope that maybe this time I will find my way back. And when I do, I will walk the road until I reach the end.